Welcome everybody. Thank you for coming. Really appreciate it. Amara's been doing a lot of work on this process. Yeah, just thanks for being in here in person, and we have some people virtually as well. My name is Benjamin Davis. I work for THGA in the Research and Planning Division. I'm about to have my 1 year a week from today. So very, very exciting stuff. Just a little bit about me. My family moved to Middle Tennessee in 2015. I've got a pretty good understanding of Middle Tennessee, but through our research, we've really learned a lot about all the development districts. These slides are going to be posted on our page in the coming weeks. A lot of people ask that just because they want to reference it for their constituents, their partners, that kinds of things. So Amara will email them out whenever that's done. So thanks to Renee and Bill for hosting this event and working so closely with Amara. It's been a big undertaking, so I'm sure that she appreciates the help a ton. So this is just kind of an overview of our consolidated plan. So this presentation and then the focus groups we're going to do after are just one part of this process. So we also administered a housing needs survey. I'm not sure if maybe you guys took it or your organizations took it, but Amara's going to start analyzing all those results, and they'll be kind of posted within the consolidated plan. And so really this process is just trying to find out more from people working in housing. Because, as a state agency, our capacity is limited. And so the con plan is every 5 years, we have to submit it to HUD for around $50 to $60 million. And the funds are distributed into local communities for 5 programs. So Community Development Block Grant, CDBG, Emergency Solutions Grant, Home. We just restarted our home rental program, mostly for rural areas back in 2023, the Housing Trust Fund, and then Housing Opportunities for Persons with HIV or AIDS. And so, again, this is just kind of an opportunity for us to get input and also for us to kind of share some of the research that we've been doing over the past few years. So this is kind of what the process looks like. So again, these are the 5 programs that we're talking about today. So CDBG is mostly for infrastructure, and that's actually mostly handled by Tennessee's Department of Economic and Community Development. So we don't directly oversee that program, excuse me. And then these middle 3 programs, so Home, NHTF, and ESG, are all administered by THGA. So Home, like I said before, we're kind of branching out into rural areas. But Home is mostly focused on single-family homes, both rehabilitation and new construction. The Housing Trust Fund is mostly focused on multifamily development. ESG is for homelessness and supportive services. And then HOPWA is for low-income people below 80% AMI that have at least one person with HIV or AIDS in their household. And that one's overseen by the Department of Health. So HOPWA is Department of Health, CDBG is Economic and Community Development, and then the 3 are THGA. So before we kind of take a deep dive, we just want to, what we like to call a spirit of humility. Amara and I aren't originally from Tennessee. We've been in Nashville for a few years. Like I said, I've been here for 9. So we need context, especially in areas outside of the middle of the state. And so we've done a few of these presentations already, and we know that data doesn't capture everything. It's never going to. But the data that we're looking at today is from the American Community Survey, at least most of it, released by the Census Bureau. And the most up-to-date data is from 2022. So we're not capturing, the last 2 years. And we all know that things have been crazy and, since the pandemic. And so it's a little outdated and can be, subject to sampling error. In the Q&A or the focus groups that we're going to kind of do afterwards, we would love to hear, what did you notice? What seemed to accurately capture what you guys are saying in the community, as well as what was missing or maybe what seemed a little bit off, because we all know that numbers can't, tell the whole story. We also need kind of that qualitative aspect. And so overall, we recognize that we don't know everything, but we have been doing a ton of research. So I hope it looks like we know what we're talking about. So yeah, we all know that there's challenges within the housing world. And so we need to both focus on our strengths and, what the needs of this development district are. So this is kind of how it's going to work today. I've kind of already prefaced this a little bit, but we're going to start with this housing needs presentation, just talk through some data and analysis that we've been doing. Then we're going to have some Q&A time. Omar will read out questions online if people have questions in the Teams meeting. And then our focus groups, there's one for housing affordability, we try and hit both topics in the focus groups, but housing affordability and homelessness and supportive services with kind of fair housing is one of the main concentrations. So today we're going to talk about different components of the housing needs environment, which all of us know is crazy right now. So this is just kind of the framework for how our team and our agency thinks about housing. And so, yeah, so first we're going to start off with current population, households, what their incomes look like, then going to look at supply, prices, and then kind of more future leaning. And then, of course, all of these kind of interact with housing instability as well. Okay, so this is the framework that we're going to kind of move throughout in this presentation. So first, we're going to talk about what the region's like, who lives here, what types of people, where are they concentrated, where is housing concentrated, and the prices in the area. And then we're going to move on to what types of housing is needed, and then what happens if housing isn't built. So kind of a focus on housing instability. Was I on the wrong slide?
It's just faint. Leave a little outline, but you're good.
Oh, I went backwards. Sorry. Okay. So to start off, there's 9 development districts in Tennessee. And so you guys are, of course, kind of at the upper right. And this is looking at population. So just total number of people as of 2022. And so it's not really surprising that GNRC, Greater Nashville Regional Council, is the biggest. We all know it's growing pretty quick. And then the first Tennessee Development District has as of 2022, about 520,000 people. But it's not the smallest. There's also Northwest and Southwest with about 250,000 in both. And so these areas of population, the gray areas are areas of population density. So shouldn't come as a surprise to you all. I'm sure that, Johnson City, Kingsport, Bristol are kind of, urban areas within this district. And then this is looking at population change. So it's kind of a similar map, but it's overlaid with these triangles, which show the change in the percent change in the number of people from 2017 to 2022. And so you can see that the most growth in Tennessee is 10.5%. But this district has been experiencing about 2.3% growth in those 5 years. So there's, it's not the fastest growing, but it's growing faster than West Tennessee. So Northwest, Southwest, and Mid-South are either negative or Southwest is just 0.5 percentage point. So now just drilling down to the county. So this is looking at the same metric, that population change from 2017 to 2022. And you can see that the population growth is mainly driven by Washington and Greene counties, which makes sense because these are kind of the right there is kind of that large urban area. And so, yeah, so Washington is about the highest one is 5.4%, and then the lowest is Carter, which has experienced a negative 0.3% growth in the last 5 years. So kind of looking at some demographics across the district. So starting with age, about 58% of people in this district fall within those younger and mid-adult categories. And so that's from 20 all the way up to 64 is about 60% of the total population. And then among seniors and children, so from 0 to 19 and then older than 65, are pretty evenly split at about 21% each. And so race, the region is relatively homogeneous. So you've got white folks is about 91% of the population, followed by Black folks is Hispanic at 2.9%, and that encompasses all people that identify as Hispanic. So kind of multiple races within there. And then all other races, which is things like Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, American Indian, Asian, those types of things. I might have missed one, but with income, the thing really to note here is this arrow. So that arrow notes the median income in this district. So it falls within kind of $50,000 to $75,000 a year, with very little making over 100,000, and then a vast majority. I had this on my notes. About 60%, give or take, about that's lower than the income distribution. Did I do that math right, y'all? 46. Yeah, 60-ish. I was a math major, but mental math is hard. So this chart's going to kind of appear in multiple spots, kind of coming up in the next few slides. So when we talk about household tenure, we're talking about people that rent and people that own. So you can see that a majority of this region, about 3/4, 71%, that actually own their homes, either with or without a mortgage. But typically people have a mortgage. This is the homeownership rate across all 9 development districts. So you can see that this one is among the highest of all of them. So there's a pretty strong homeownership rate compared to most other development districts. There's just 2 that's greater. So Upper Cumberland at 72%, and then South Central at 74%, which is like the area south of Nashville, Brentwood, Franklin, those types of places. The left pie chart's the one that I just talked about, but kind of connecting the dots here, the left chart is, the same as we saw a minute ago. And so, like we said, when we talk about housing tenure, we like to think of, okay, how are renters experiencing the market and how are owners experiencing the market? And so they're not the same size group in this district. 70% of the population is owner. But this just shows the overall distribution for people in those categories. And so not going to read off all the percentages, but you can see that owners tend to be older, which, all of us, it makes sense that you need money for a down payment, you need credit, you need assets in order to qualify for a mortgage. And so this is looking at renter and owner in terms of the race distribution. So you can see that about 90% of renters are white and 96% are owners. And so white people are overrepresented within home ownership, while Black people and other races are about 11% of renters, and then only about 4% of owners. So they're underrepresented in this district of people that buy or own their own homes, excuse me. Okay, so this is just kind of a different way of thinking about it. So these are looking at, the income distribution among renters and owners. And so kind of intuitive, again, higher income makes you more likely to purchase a mortgage. And so here for renters, about 68% of renter households make less than $50,000. So that's the bottom 2 chunks here make up more than half, almost 70% of renters. And so kind of interestingly for this district, it's not like that for all, but owner household incomes are pretty evenly split. I mean, they're very similar. There's not a huge skewness, kind of higher income, lower income. They're pretty evenly split um, among the different income segments, which is, could be a good thing given that, lower income people can also afford to own their homes. Okay, so this is looking at AMI, so area median income. And so when we talk about this, 100% would be the median. Anything below 100% falls below the median. Anything above is above the median. And so looking at these segments again, 68% are making at or less than 80% AMI. And so this light green, that's what we call extremely low income. That's from 0 to 30% AMI. 30 to 50 is very low income. And then moderately low income is the third one from the bottom. And then middle and upper. So as you can see, a lower percentage of AMI means you're more likely to be a renter. And of course, again, this makes sense. And so for owners, over half of people in this district make more than the median individual or household, excuse me. Okay, so we just talked about population and income trends. And so now we're going to kind of move on to the current housing supply, which we all know right now is a mess. So one of the ways that our team is trying to think about housing is that that we need to meet needs among the whole income spectrum. So everything from homelessness, supportive services, all the way to market rate rental housing and affordable home ownership. THGA doesn't do really anything with market rate home ownership, so we need to kind of focus along this continuum. And so with those AMI bands, it doesn't mean that these are the only categories that need that support. It's just those that are extremely low income, less than 30%, are more likely to experience housing instability and require supportive services. And so, like I said, we want to accommodate movement along the continuum, both up and down. So if somebody, is kind of moving up and they have access to amenities and job opportunities and they have savings, but something, sets them back, some type of emergency, medical issue, whatever it is, we still have housing available kind of throughout the lifespan of people's lives. And so contextually, it makes sense. So, we don't need the same housing for our entire lives. I rent right now, but I'll also likely buy a home and then downsize one day. And so really what we're trying to get at with this slide is we need to meet people where they are and have housing across the entire income spectrum. So this graph shows the distribution of the type of housing units in this area. And so it is mostly single family homes at about 68%. For detached, so what we think of as kind of a traditional single family home. And then one unit attached is only 2% of the distribution. That would be things like condos, townhomes, that kind of thing where units are attached to each other. And so there's not very many in this district. The next biggest category is mobile homes / manufactured housing at 14.8%. Which is the highest rate out of all 9 development districts. So at about 15% is the highest that we're seeing.
That includes manufactured homes.
Yes. Yeah. Anything that wasn't built on site, right, Amara? Yeah. Okay, so housing starts in the United States. This is from the Urban Institute. And so this is kind of a story that I'm sure all of us know all too well. This red line is the Great Recession, the financial crisis, and the housing crisis in 2007 and 8. And so you can see that home building starts just kind of tanked And you can see that we've kind of recovered, but we've never really fully recovered. Which given, population growth and other things, we have a severe shortage of housing. And so we'll see this in just a second, but it causes the median age of our housing to go up because we stopped building and we've never kind of recovered. So yeah, here's the median age of rental housing. So as a result of those decreased housing starts, the median age of housing in the United States and Tennessee is pretty old. And so the upper part of Washington, Sullivan, what's the other one? And Hawkins is kind of that area where those gray areas on the map before with population density kind of makes sense that they're a little bit newer in Washington, just because there's newer development in this area. There's more dense population, so there's more construction. Of course, that's just what the data tells us. So in our focus groups, I would love to hear if this kind of matches anecdotally with what you guys are seeing here.
And does that correlate directly to median income as well?
What would you say?
Well, could you say more about?
Well, I'm just asking, I mean, if, so like in Sullivan, for instance, 47 years old, is that because of salaries being lower in that area or salaries being lower, say Johnson or Hancock? I don't know. I'm just asking a question.
Yeah, I guess I would say that I don't know for sure. I mean, obviously for renters, since they tend to have lower incomes, there could be some correlation, but I'm actually not sure.
Yeah, I thought we had a graph, and then we don't. But we can definitely look into that because that's a good question. Okay, we just did rental housing. Moving on to owner. So you can kind of see the colors are a lot lighter here. So the age of owner housing is a lot newer than the median age of rental housing. And so the Far East, so Sullivan, Carter, how do you say the county with a U? Unicoi. Okay, beautiful. We read these all the time, but you never hear somebody actually say them. In Johnson is a good bit older than the rest of Tennessee. So Sullivan is kind of experiencing something similar for both rental and owner housing, with 47 years for rental, 48 years for owner housing. So we just talked about current housing supply. So now we're going to look at some data on housing prices. We all know that's an issue right now, but both rents and mortgage payments, things like that. Or not mortgage payments, home prices, excuse me. Okay, so the green scale is the median gross rent as of 2022. And then the triangles show the percentage change in median gross rents from 2017 to 2022. And so you can see that in this kind of denser population area is where most of the median gross rent is rising the fastest. So 25% for Sullivan, Washington 24%, and then one more big thing to note is Hancock County at 42.5%, roughly, which is the biggest out of any county in this area.
And you need to say this is 2022, right?
Yes, 2022.
Well, how-
Is that for a particular bedroom unit? I mean, how many bedrooms is that based on?
So this includes all rental units. Obviously, the median, when you think about pricing, is probably going to be that 2-bedroom mid-sized unit. Since there are going to be a few that are bigger and some that are smaller, but I would say the median price is probably going to reflect a 2-bedroom. That being said, this is the lining up all the prices. So this is just showing the middle price. This is not showing, some rents are probably going to be quite a lot higher. Some might be lower, but, and like you said, this could have changed significantly even within the last 2 years. So
when does that when do you have the updated version of this?
We will get the 2023 data in September is when the Census Bureau releases it. And, you know, for our purposes, we're trying to compare across multiple regions, which is why we tend to use the ACS surveys, just because it has such a long-running methodology and we can compare with some accuracy across regions. But, you know, for local planning, of course, like trying to see what the most up-to-date rents are, looking more at like the housing apps or even just kind of keeping track of a few properties and how things move would probably give you a better local sense. This is just kind of the best that we can do for comparison's sake.
Thanks so much.
I will say this too about Hancock County. I'm thinking like the 42%, theirs was probably so low that although that looks skewed, I would say there's probably coming up to, I guess, a baseline.
Yeah, that's true for owner as well. So it's actually higher in Hancock County, about 81%, but the nominal value might not be as high.
Correct.
So
So there's
kind
one,
of driving the
Yes,
growth itself kind of up.
it's one of the poorest counties that,
correct.
in the state.
Across the state.
Oh,
it says
okay.
Hancock County.
So yeah, so median rents in Hancock County went up by 42% and then almost double that in the median home sale price in 2017, or excuse me, in 2022. Prices. What was I going to say? Oh, Johnson County. So the median home sale price in from 2017 to 2022 almost doubled in Johnson County. It had 93% growth in just 5 years, which is,
So we have Mayor Potter here from Johnson County.
well, there. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm sure it's also crazy in the last 2 years. So it might be even greater than 100%, more than 2 times. Are you writing down some percentages? I can leave this up for a second.
What's PowerPoint? Can we have access to that?
Yeah, so we're working on finalizing a few slides that we're not showing today, but in the coming weeks, Amara's going to, yeah, they'll be on our website, THGA's website under the research and planning page, and then she'll email it out to all the development districts as well. She spent a lot of time, sweat, blood, energy on this, and so if you want to use it for other uses, you know, I'm sure that she would appreciate it.
If you were to zoom out on that map, I would assume that it's pretty green. How do we compare to the rest of the state? Yeah.
I mean, it depends. Obviously, Nashville is very dark. Memphis is not growing incredibly. I was in Memphis last week. The growth rates aren't exceptionally high, but there's also very little growth in Memphis. So the population actually dropped by a percentage point. That was in the earlier slide. I didn't point it out, but their population is actually bleeding. So they're moving either to, you know, Mississippi and Arkansas. Is that who around it? Yeah. Or they're moving to other counties in Tennessee.
That this area is, we're gonna look at like affordability, and this region is more affordable than some other places in the state. Because what they do is they then compare it to like the median buyer, how many homes can that buyer afford, and Ben's gonna present on that in a minute. The urban centers like Washington County, all across the state, just tend to have the highest prices. And the greater Nashville region is especially high prices. Like the median household or the median housing price in Davidson County is $450,000. That's the middle.
Is that the day's rate?
Quite expensive, huh?
Is that the day's rate or 2020?
That was 2022, so probably not today even, but yeah. But yeah, I mean, Chattanooga, Memphis, Washington County, Knox County, all of those places, like the urban centers tend to have the highest prices, but not necessarily the fastest growth. So there's some places that are like the market is changing really fast, even if it wasn't even if it's still overall affordable.
And you know,
Yeah.
I'm looking at Johnson County. I think we're pretty well somewhat poor county. I guess 93, and then I look at Hancock and they're at 81.
Mhm.
Just,
That's changed.
Definitely. In just 5 years.
yeah, and you know, where my people was with married, maybe 2 kids, sort of getting by. Now they're going backwards 100 miles per hour.
Yeah.
You know,
It's kind of like that continuum slide and people are sliding back.
Have you ever done a correlation with this versus what your interest rates are? Of buying homes?
But I do expect, given that this isn't going to capture what happens when the Fed changed the rate so quickly, that isn't going to show up in this too well, that we will see that, like, when we add the 2023 data or the 2024 data, that it should become more apparent.
Johnson County, where people was trying to start off a family, with the prices, I mean, there's no way to get a start. And then there again with renting too. It's sort of the American dream or.
Yeah, I didn't put that one out, but that one's, 74%. Yeah, so it's pretty stark as well.
It's a lot of pressure on.
Yeah, I mean, it's just,
Is that people from out of state buying homes in Johnson County for 215,000?
yeah. I mean, for instance, I seen a house or two a couple of years ago. I would give 159,000 for either one of them. Next day you turn around, or a month or two, or next year, wow, one of them was priced 259,000. And people's buying this stuff. I mean, you know, y'all probably like me. I won't buy a new car or used car unless it kicks the tires. They're just, I mean, it's crazy.
Sight unseen.
So I understand.
I also wondered too about the effect of second home sales, for people who are buying a second home, maybe because of our mountain counties.
Yeah,
That
like
could
vacation
be
homes and stuff.
driving up.
Yeah, possibly.
And I'm sure that's part of what your situation is there in Johnson County.
And then all of a sudden they turn into Airbnbs, they don't come up for a second home much, they're renting so much a month.
And that would not be reflected in your rental data because that's short-term rental under 30 days. Correct. Airbnb.
And that's happening in Bristol, particularly with the casino. We're seeing a lot of it.
So our economist, she's in Knoxville today, so not too far. She just did an investor analysis of Davidson County. We're hoping to kind of extend it, but she wears many hats. She's been with THJ for a long time. She's fantastic, but she looked at short-term rental, or not, excuse me, let me think so I say this correctly. So she looked at the number, or like the share of homes that are being purchased in Davidson County by what she defined as investors. And she used a methodology from another study. But the paper is kind of looking at, okay, if people own less than, I think it's 4 properties off the top of my head, it might be something else. Okay, 3. How many of those homes sold in the county are people that own more than 3 properties or people that are just buying for the first time? So I can point y'all in the right direction if anybody's interested. It's on our research page. But that came out a few months ago.
Yeah, and like Ben said, she's hoping then to look at some of the other like population centers where we are seeing these big increases in price, to see what proportion of those are maybe being bought by investors.
I think the urban centers are seeing that, and I think rural areas with tourism is higher, seeing it.
And have you taken into account, the younger generation, a lot of them don't want to live, way far out or in the rural areas, so they come to the urban areas. Have you taken into account of any of that?
Well, you can see it in the data. So like, we're showing you the age distributions for the entire district, which typically has like both a population center as well as like a more rural area. encompassed all in one, all together, but you can see that if you look at it for different counties, the ones that are more urban do tend to be younger in their age skew. So so you're right about that. It shows up in the data. We haven't necessarily looked at it related to housing prices or that sort of thing, but you are correct that that's a trend.
This is great. Anything else before we move on?
I noticed on my county, we barely had an increase in population. They're trying to look at it here, so like we barely had an increase in population, but then the housing prices.
Well, and that's why we wanted to mention the supply issue related to the recession, because since we've been underbuilding, even if you don't have extreme population growth, people are moving throughout, the typical life cycle anyway. And so new households are forming, but new homes may not be being built at the same rate. And so you see this increase or at least stabilization of prices still, because the supply is not really keeping up with what's happening in the population.
It's so bad, my county at the courthouse. There's cars in the parking lot the other day when there's one from California, another one from Connecticut, people standing outside. They front homes.
Yeah, well, right, so there, that with the trend in remote work to some degree, you're seeing people move maybe from higher cost areas to places that are more affordable as well. Like that is something we don't have great, but like the state doesn't have super great data on that. And even at a federal level, I think Ben was saying that you can only get it at a state level, right?
Yeah, so I actually learned this at my last job, my last research job, but the IRS publishes something called AGI, so it's adjusted gross income. And we can chat about it after. I can kind of point you in the right direction, but they basically track people's tax returns. So like I moved here in 2015, my dad filed taxes 2015 in Charlotte or in North Carolina, and then here in 2016. So they kind of use that one to track how incomes are moving in and out of the state. But also they count the number of people by the individual tax returns that were filed one year kind of to the next.
We could see like the influx of folks moving from other places to Tennessee, for example.
And I will say it is that is some of the trend. For sure. I mean, I can picture the map that we made in my head, but yeah, there are people that are, Tennessee's growing. It is. For migration, and public, kind of a mix between the two of them. All right, let me see if I can find this slide. Where were we? Okay. That was kind of a good lead into the next section. So now we're going to look at the type of housing that we need. So how do we know that we need it? What are the challenges to building that housing? And then something to keep in mind for our focus group, what strategies may enable us to build a housing that people actually need. All right, so now we're going to talk a little bit about future housing supply. We think of cost burden as kind of an evidence of a supply issue. Either the units don't exist or they're not enough, or somebody with a higher income is occupying that unit. So the way that we define cost burden is cost burden households spend 30% or more of their income on housing, whether that's a mortgage, rent, and it includes utilities as well. So yeah, you can see that here. It kind of looks like good news. It's less than some other areas of the state, especially in the Mid-South, so Memphis on the bottom left. But if you think about it, I mean, that's still almost 40% of people that are paying more than 30% of their income on rent or more, Well, this is rent, excuse me, I misspoke. This is rental cost burden. Also looking at rental cost burden. So this is the percent change in the number of households from 2017 to 2022. And so there is some good news. There's about an 11% reduction in the number of households that are cost burdened, but that could be kind of because of a myriad of things. People could be moving out of the area, their incomes could raise. There's kind of a lot of mechanisms for how that can happen. You think so?
I know rents have gone up so much,
Yeah.
so quickly. Stories all the time of folks not being able to afford their rent.
Mhm.
you know, Out of a place or something like that, so. Maybe so, I don't want to sit here and argue with data, I'm just saying it just seems a little, that number seems like.
Well, and that's why that's when we ask what you notice or what seems off, because, it is true that rents went up everywhere, so then why would cost burden decrease? Like Ben said, there can be a lot of reasons for that, but that's important for, for y'all to talk about with us about what you're seeing, because that doesn't mean that this is exactly right.
Sure. And asset 22.
Yes.
I'm trying, you gotta keep going, grain of salt. Okay, so this is showing the percentage change in those households, just kind of drilled down to the county level. So you can see that the decrease is over 30% for Hawkins, Greene, and Carter. Which, anecdotally, maybe that doesn't make sense. But also kind of on the higher end, Hancock County, kind of like it makes sense because we've seen the rents have gone up 40% and the home price has gone up 80% over those 5 years. So it makes sense that rental cost burden has gone up by 22% in Hancock County.
Yeah. The percent or like the number of people has increased by 20% who are experiencing.
Oh, you're right. Sorry, I mixed it up. You're right. Okay, so this is looking at severe cost burden, which we define as spending more than half of your income on housing. And so you can kind of see here again that rental cost burden is comparatively, lower compared to the rest of the state. But again, that's 70% of people that are spending more than their income on just housing, right? Just, one part of living. This is looking at the percentage change, so kind of a similar trend. It's 10.9% for that 30% cost burden. And then 12.1% percentage change for severe cost burden, that 50% mark. And so the decrease for severe is greater than the one for that 30% cost burden metric. Similar to the last one, drilling down to all the counties in this district. So we're at almost 40% for Hawkins, Greene, and Carter, which for reference, it was 30% for that first cost burden. And for severe cost burden, it's about 40%. Also, I feel like we keep coming back to this, but Hancock County is getting, hammered almost. But, kind of something to keep in mind with that is that it is a smaller population county. So it's not like the number of people isn't as great as some of those population density areas, but that's almost a 300% increase in the last 5 years in severe cost burden.
How did you get the data for the cost burden? You must have pulled data from different types of data that come up with these numbers. There's not a data set already out there about cost burden.
Yeah.
How is this calculated?
So this is calculated using the American Community Survey. And just for your reference, like when I send out the PowerPoint, if you look over at the key on the side, you can see what table I used from the ACS survey to calculate this. So this is table B25 070. And it counts the number, it shows the numbers of households who are spending different percentage ranges on rent. So I just aggregated all of the ones that reported spending, more than 30% on rent or more than 50% on rent compared to all of the renters in the area.
Thanks, Amar.
One thing you have to keep into account, that Hancock County, if you've never been there, there's very few housing apartments.
It's a small group of renters, yeah. So we could have sampling error in this as well, like, you surveyed this person, but not this person. And so when they do their estimates, right, there could be a large margin of error where they're not totally capturing what's happening. And also too, you're right that this is maybe affecting a smaller number of people because there's more owners than renters anyway. And maybe if there's very few renters in Hancock County, seeing swings in that small group doesn't necessarily mean it's affecting everyone.
In small rural areas, you may have one or two families that own most of the rental units. And so if they decide they're gonna raise the prices of all the rental units at the same time, it's gonna have a larger effect.
Definitely.
The rentals have gone up, but there are more people sharing that cost, so numbers wouldn't reflect necessarily that they're as cost burden because instead of paying $900 by themselves, they're splitting $450 with someone else. And then that's really not showing a true. Technically, they would be cost burden if they were trying to do it by themselves, but they're forced into a situation of sharing with
That's
somebody else. So.
That's a good point.
Which in Appalachia means you might have multiple generations under one household working, carrying that cost.
I love that you
Grandparents,
say
parents,
Appalachia.
So-
Everyone in Nashville says Appalachia, and it is. Me from North Carolina, yeah, I mean, I was an hour from the border and I know.
Correct.
I don't know how to pronounce the county. Unicoi?
Yeah, you got it.
Koi fish.
Beautiful
Okay.
town.
All right, so this is, we're still trying to, talk about housing affordability, obviously. But instead of renters, now we're looking at homeowners. So the Homeowner Opportunity Index tracks the percentage of homes sold in a calendar year. So for this year, it's 2022. So those percentage of homes that would be affordable to a household with the median income. And so really what we want is to be in the middle. So we want something like 50%, around 50%, or more. But yeah, so in these darker areas, it means that less homes are affordable for the median buyer. So you can see for Nashville, only 31.5% of homes not last year, in 2022 would be affordable to that median buyer. If they were looking for housing, whereas the lighter, so for this district, it's 60%. That 60% of homes sold in 2022 would have been affordable to the median buyer. And so kind of drilling down again, this is for all the counties rather than just the region. So you can see that there's decreases over the last 5 years across the whole region. And that's I don't know about the total US, but that's across the whole state. Like I don't think we even have one county that has become more affordable. So it's very similar to the rest of the state. So in Johnson, so there was a 30, this is a point change, so not a percentage change, but the actual number itself. And so so 38.4% of homes sold in 2022 would have been affordable to the median buyer. Simply put, homes are less affordable. Not that we don't already know that. Okay, so this is kind of our last section before we, have some discussion, some questions. So what happens if housing isn't built? And so as we've seen, prices go up and we continue having housing starts lower than the historic trend, and, the resulting supply issues, people face more housing instability. So, what housing stability types are people experiencing, and then who is experiencing it. And so something to keep in mind for our focus group that we'd love to hear about is what strategies may address the current instability right now and prevent kind of looking forward into the next few years. Yeah, so kind of the last part of our needs, housing instability. So a tricky thing about homelessness and housing instability is it's measured using a COC, continuum of care. They don't exactly align with the development districts. So you can see like Knoxville, for example, this development district has, is it 3? It kind of bleeds into 3 different ones. Lucky for us though, the Appalachian is perfectly aligned. So we only have to talk about one. So this is a point in time count, which is a national physical count of homelessness. So folks go out every January and actually count those that are experiencing homelessness. So that would include people in shelters, also people on the streets, in their cars, et cetera. And so the dotted line is, the dotted lines here are COVID. So, the methodology changed, the world was crazy. So kind of take, that with a grain of salt. But, this is kind of the best estimate we have. And so the pig count is always going to be an undercount. You're always going to miss somebody when you're doing a physical count like that. But you can see that in terms of that count over the last 6 years, so this one actually goes through 2023, gone from about 450 to a little bit less than 600. So you are seeing housing stability kind of rise across the board. And then for Black people and children, the trend is pretty flat, with Black people experiencing kind of a small bump in homelessness. But keep in mind for this region, over 91% of folks are white. So just a little perspective there. And then the PIT count for children is actually gone down a little bit over the last 6 years.
Do you by any chance have that with the age?
Yes, we do.
I work with aging, that's why.
Oh, gotcha.
That's why we're-
And that's important. Yeah,
That's why-
definitely. Okay, so here, we're looking at the total population for the Appalachian Regional Continuum of Care. And then the right, we're talking about that point in time. So the graph that we just saw. And so you can see that children and seniors are underrepresented in this PIT count, while those middle-aged and younger adults, so 25 to 64, are overrepresented. And so there's a higher proportion that were physically counted as either being in a shelter or otherwise homeless. So comparing, this is very similar. So this is the total population for the COC. This is that point in time count that we've been discussing the last few slides. And so you can see the total COC population is about 96%. There's 96% for white people, but they experience less homelessness as a proportion, whereas minorities are overrepresented in those point in time counts. So Black people make up 2.4% of the population in the COC, but make up 8.9% in that point in time count. Similarly, all of the races, so kind of, we would have liked to display all of them, but you wouldn't been able to see, the little tiny line. So for all of the races, they make up 1.9% of the population in this COC, but make up 4.4% of that count. So it's kind of skewing that way, kind of skewing up. So this is cost burden in areas with concentrated poverty. Concentrated poverty is 40% of the households in these census tracts. So each one, this is drilling down a little bit more granular than what we've seen before. We've mainly been looking at counties, but these little tiny things are census tracts. And so one way we look at concentrated poverty is at those census tracts because, at a county level, it's not, it's not as useful. And so the areas with a red outline are defined as an area with concentrated poverty. So there's only 2 in this district. I'm going to point them out. They're hard to see. There's one right there. And then, let's see better on the screen. And then one right there. And so we would love to hear about those areas. They're pretty small in terms of a census tract, but we're interested to see what you guys think about those 2 tracts and, maybe some insight on why they're areas of concentrated poverty. And so this happens to be the same map for some of our other development districts. They're not the same. But so now we're looking at kind of recaps. So racially and ethnically concentrated areas of poverty. But yeah, so they don't meet those HUD guidelines for recaps. And so that's why these are the same map. And so when you look at the demographics of these concentrated poverty areas, which remember there's just 2, so there's one there, and one there. So in those census tracts with concentrated areas of poverty and high levels of severe cost burden, 41 to 48% of the heads of household are a part of a minority group. So one of these is 41%, and then the other is 48% where the head of household identifies as part of a minority. And so with these areas of concentrated poverty, we're talking about 40% of the population is at or below the federal poverty line. And so, homelessness overrepresentation closely correlates with having fewer resources. And so it indicates that, in these areas, we might need some serious, housing stability services going forward. And that's it.
Interesting to know on that concentrated area of poverty.
That one.
It's obviously in Sullivan County. Surprising to me that it's not in the city of Kingsport. Where would that be?
Kingsport is a little east, isn't it?
Right. Where would that be? Right next to Hawkins. Sir Walter? Yeah. Could be, yes.
Not
Wilding Gardens, the other way.
Right.
Yeah. So that we can see the map, the other, in the Sullivan County, in the census. Can you make that box go? Because
What box?
yeah, the one that says in the census tract of concentrated areas of poverty. It's,
last
they're
slide.
covering up the,
I don't know, can I?
it's covering up the other,
Previous one.
there we go. Yeah.
This one?
Yeah,
Oh, there we go.
so that we can kind of see.
Yeah.
Where was the other concentrated area?
It's kind of hard to see. It's the right of Washington. It's right here.
East side.
Yeah.
What's odd about that spot is we're 2 of our largest homeless encampments. are.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Well,
That's
why we
that's good to know.
included
That's
that.
interesting. Yeah.
That it tends to, that's like, we're looking at the factors that often lead to housing instability where they overlap, and so there we go, I guess.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
So yeah, any questions, comments? What did you notice? What seemed to accurately capture? Like, okay, that makes sense, anecdotally, or, like, I think that Johnson, we, had that discussion. What doesn't exactly make sense? And then what was missing that you would, like to see as well? Is there anything online?
Yeah, I want another thing.
I guess I did just now change it.
Yeah, trying to think of where it fits and such. One of the things that I think we see in there, and probably say more about, I don't know, but the trend of without race, the rents going up, the population is really being hit, and I've seen too many cases in our homeless population for those that are on SSA, SSI, because now we're not talking about 30% or 50% of their income going to rents. It's 80, 90%. Rents are about what SSI is. So we're close to 100%. What about the utilities? What about groceries?
Yeah.
So our elderly and our disabled population have been decimated by the rising rents. And I don't know how to, not sure if that was captured properly anywhere on this.
But it's hard, if this is 2-year-old data or a year and a half old, that makes it hard to think then for what's missing now. And I'd say at our day shelter, that's exact, we're seeing an increase in number of people with disabilities and number of elderly. And they have income. A lot of them, they have health insurance, but they can't afford their housing.
Well, that might be something that we could consider having an extra analysis, which is like, what is the typical SSA, SSI payment, and comparing it to the median rent to illustrate how difficult that is.
Yeah.
And I do know that for the COCs that are, providing those services, they're now tracking in a more granular way the number of folks who are elderly or who are disabled, because anecdotally people are saying we're seeing more of that. So I know for 2023, for the first time ever, they didn't just do kids, adults as the categories. It's now broken down by more granularly by age group, so that we can be more aware of we're seeing more seniors during the pig counts and that sort of thing.
One thing, with aging, I work with the aging, and, they're expecting the big wave of, the next few years, that's gonna really, the aging population will be out the road. And, like our information assistant line, they're gathering numbers up there that's almost doubling in some places of people needing assistance because they can't afford their housing, and then they lose their house. So then they try to rent someplace or they go homeless. And so the aging population, that's why I was asking about the aging a while ago. And you hit the nail on the head. I don't know if that's reflecting that.
Yeah, probably not yet, but people are aware that it's an issue. So they're trying to develop better data tracking systems so that we can have a handle on how trends are changing across geographies and so on. Like you're saying, the generation that's moving into that senior group is large. The age of people right now who are 55 to 64 is larger than the group that is 65 to 74. Obviously, some of that is going to be related to people passing away, but generationally speaking, it's a larger group. So you will need an increase for sure in senior housing. Whatever it exists now is just not going to accommodate the same, the number of people that are coming afterward. If that makes sense. So.
And something else, I mentioned that there's always an undercount. It's one thing that also could be happening is that, I forget the term, but doubled up, where perhaps seniors or, or younger people or whomever is moving in with somebody else. And so otherwise, if they didn't have that support, they would face housing instability. So that's something that, isn't super accurately captured.
Yeah, the hypothesis is that the point in time counts kind of the most severe form of homelessness, in the sense that, people are living on the street or in their car or something like that. But the definition of homelessness also includes folks that are staying temporarily with a friend, are moving between relatives' houses and so on. And there's some evidence that both children and seniors experience that form of homelessness quite a lot more frequently, because, people work pretty hard to keep that group housed because they're more vulnerable. But then it also makes it harder to see the instability from the outside, I guess, in a numbers sense.
So at our day center in Bristol, for 7 months, we've seen over 1,000 unique individuals. Probably way fewer than 10% are people who are housed who come to eat a meal or do their laundry or whatever. And our pit count, I think, was less than 100. So, we're talking huge, huge difference. And those are people who are in shelters or on the street.
Okay.
So, not people much who are couch surfing, doing it.
Sure.
Just so y'all know, the pit count, couch surfing or doubled up is not in that data. It is in schools. If you ask a school, the homeless liaison, what the numbers are, if you don't specify literally homeless, you'll get the doubled up in their count. If you want it, our pit count doesn't take that.
That's a good point.
We can't count them if they stayed with a family member the night before.
Yeah.
So you're right, the
Definitional.
pits are not, they're not accurate.
Right.
It
Right,
just
and
doesn't
it's
give you a
all
good picture,
dependent
but
on how many volunteers you recruit, what the weather is, all those different things that are variable, but we in Bristol need to do a ton better job of count. Calendar count.
Let's go ahead and transition to the focus groups.
Okay.
What
time are we waiting?
Doing fine, but.
Okay.
For those who joined us online, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to go ahead and end the Teams presentation. And I will be emailing out the slides, as Ben mentioned, or letting everybody know when they've been posted. So thank you for joining us, those who are online.